Okay. Okay, good evening. Welcome to January 29th's meeting of the Traffic and Transportation Advisory Commission. Please rise and follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Mrs. Zambrano, would you please call the roll?
Vice Chair Engler.
Here.
Commissioner Gregory.
Here.
Commissioner McMahon.
Here.
Commissioner Reeder.
Here.
And Chair Lemo is currently absent. We're expecting him a little later.
Thank you. Any person who wishes to speak regarding an item on the agenda or on a subject within the city's jurisdiction during the public comments portion of the agenda must file a speaker card with the recording secretary. Mrs. Zambrano, would you raise your hand? Thank you. Before that portion of the agenda is called. Any person who wishes to speak on a specific agenda item must also file a public speaker card before that specific item is called. Persons addressing the Traffic Commission are requested to state their name and city of residence for the record. Under state law, issues presented or introduced under public comments can have no action and will be referred to the will be referred to the Traffic Engineering Division Manager for administrative action or scheduled on a subsequent agenda. It would be appreciated if you would silence all cell phones during the meeting. Which reminds me, okay. As a reminder, there is not to be any dialogue between the audience and commissioners at any time. TOTV can only record your comments when speaking into the microphone. A wireless microphone is available for your convenience should you need to step away from the podium while speaking. And now we are going to turn to agenda item 4, public comments. And we have, let's see. We have two public comment cards for. Oh, I'm sorry. One card for item 4. Mr. Al DeLore.
Thank you, Advisory Committee. My name is Al DeLore. I live in 2207 Firestone Court in Oxnard. I'm asking the Advisory Commission to do a safety analysis before you put in any more speed humps. The question you have to ask yourself...
Let me interrupt you for just a minute. I am in error. I need to say that each speaker will be given 3 minutes, and they'll be timed. And we don't have our working lights, do we? The lights, are they working? Okay. So our recording secretary is going to be setting the timer.
Reset?
And I'm sorry, I just need to say this for everyone's benefit. When the yellow light displays, you will have 1 minute left. So please begin wrapping up at that time. The red light indicates that your 3 minutes are up. So please stop speaking, but remain at the podium until questions, if any, from the commissioners have been asked.
It might be more comfortable at the taller speaker. The microphone, is also on.
Go for it. The question you have to ask yourself, do you want to save lives or do you want to put speed humps in? They're completely different. Speed humps kill. I've asked the Thousand Oaks traffic engineer if he knows of any reliable peer-reviewed study that says that speed humps save lives. He hasn't found any yet. I'm still waiting for anybody to give me that answer. I'm talking about Upper Ranch Road. The actual number of people who have their EMS delayed by Upper Ranch Road hump is 2,000. I gave you a paper which says 1,800. I just got tired of counting after 1,800 people having their EMS delayed. Now, of these 2,000 people, 286 will die of sudden cardiac arrest. This is where you have a healthy heart and it just electrically malfunctions. A 1-minute delay by 10 speed humps on Upper Ranch Road will cause an extra 29 sudden cardiac deaths. These are extra deaths, 29 deaths over 80 years. Now, during this 80 years, there will be 4.4 pedestrian fatalities in Thousand Oaks. Now, that means they put a ratio in there. 7 people will die from sudden cardiac arrest for each person in all of Thousand Oaks who dies on a residential street. So you're talking about thousands and thousands of people are dying from sudden cardiac arrest to save one pedestrian. Now, during the last 18 years, there was just 1 pedestrian fatality on a residential street in Thousand Oaks. This 1 pedestrian fatality was in 2011 on Calle Alamando. It was within 90 feet of a speed hump, and this street has 10 speed humps put in 2008. And the odds of that, of speed hump saving lives and killing a person, 1,000 to 1. Okay, so I'm just asking you to do an analysis before you kill people. Thank you.
Hold on, could you go back to the podium for a minute? We have a question.
Yeah, I got your information. Thank you. It's always nice for us to be able to look at things and kind of prepare maybe some questions or whatever. But what is your source of the statistics that you quote in here?
I have them all. I'd like to give them. Actually, I'd like to give them an email and put the source. Actually, write them out where I got them from and where they actually are.
All right. Well, I can take a discussion of these facts and things that I looked up, which are not similar to the facts that you quote here.
That's why I want you to ask a question, and I'll give you the actual specific source.
All right.
These are all true. I don't want to discuss it here in front of all these people and waste of time.
And we're not here to do that. Just get the accurate information.
Now, if you can find a single reputable peer-reviewed study that says speed humps save lives, I'm willing to listen to it. Look at it.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, next we move on to item 5, which are summary notes from November 20th, 2013. They're attached to the agenda. Were there any comments or questions from commissioners? Okay. Okay, we'll move on to item 6, engineer reports. Mr. Mashiko?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Engler. This item is a continuation of a petition request that we heard back in November 20th, 2013 from the residents of Calle Olivo requesting the installation of speed humps along their street north of Avenida de los Arboles. We have a PowerPoint or slide presentation over on that side monitor. To recap what occurred at the last meeting in November 20th, the Traffic Commission voted 4-0 to continue this item and renotice the residents after 2 additional pieces of information were collected. Number 1 was to list the streets that were approved for speed humps that didn't fully meet the city's speed hump policy, but special circumstances were cited to warrant their installation. And number 2, review site distance concerns along the street due to the road curvature. So all that information's been assembled. It's in your packet before you. And after the Traffic Commission has an opportunity to listen to the residents, they can deliberate and develop a recommendation for this item. Before I proceed, I just wanted to update the Commission that we did have additional signatures submitted for this petition. 2 additional signatures came in, so now we're at 98% of the residents fronting the street in support of speed humps. That's 50 of the 51 homes along the street in favor of the speed humps. Before this meeting, we repeated the notification that we did back in November, so about 200 homes received a notification by mail of tonight's meeting, so they can speak before you. The staff recommendation is unchanged from the prior meeting. We do not recommend speed humps be installed since the city speed hump policy is not fully satisfied. Here's a location map, just to refresh everyone's memory of where Calle Olivo is located. It's to the west of the 23 freeway between Avenida de los Arboles and Pedersen Road. It's a U-shaped or horseshoe-shaped street. Crosses 3 streets twice. At the west intersection of Calle Pimiento, there's 2 cross gutters that naturally slow traffic there. To the west of this location is Calle Almendro, which already has speed humps in place to slow traffic. Just to recap some of the findings at the last meeting regarding the road conditions on Calle Olivo, there's 4 key criteria that we look at when determining whether or not speed humps whether or not they're going to meet the city's speed hump policy. 3 of these 4 are met. The petition rate is satisfied. The daily traffic volume is not satisfied. It's about 258 vehicles below the minimum threshold of 1,500 vehicles per day. The speed component is satisfied. 82% of the vehicles exceed 25 miles an hour. And the street meets the vehicle code definition as a residential street. Other findings that are not part of the speed hump criteria, but we decided to look at. Number 1 is the prevailing speeds. We took measurements at 3 locations along the road, and speeds range from 31 to 36 miles an hour. Collisions, there are no collisions on this road over a 3-year period from 2010 to 2012. And we also performed a license plate survey which confirmed that there is shortcutting on the street between Pedersen Road and Arboles. In the morning commute time, there's about 11% of this traffic that shortcuts, and 14% in the PM commute period that shortcuts between those 2 streets. We did list the 9 streets that the Traffic Commission asked information for that were approved for speed humps that didn't meet the speed hump criteria. I'm not going to go through all 9, but there are 3 of those streets located very near Calle Olivo. Those streets are Calle Almendro, Calle Tulipan, and Calle Bougainvillea. And of those 3 streets, Calle Bougainvillea is has very similar road conditions to Calle Olivo. The circumstances that were cited for Calle Bougainvillea for the speed humps include traffic diversion, school traffic, no street lights, no sidewalks, shortcutting traffic, and impaired sight distance due to road curvature. Each of those 6 conditions do apply to Calle Olivo. With regard to the concern over sight distance, one thing that you may have noticed when you drive through Thousand Oaks, all our streets more or less have what we call a curvilinear street design. It's not built on a grid, which is a straight path. We have more of a meandering road design, and as a result, we do have sight distance concerns on a lot of other streets, not just Calle Olivo. With this meandering design, it does have a built-in traffic calming procedure or traffic calming feature which it discourages the shortcutting traffic and speeding because the drivers aren't given a straight path from point A to point B. A way to eliminate this concern would be to eliminate street parking, but that's probably something that's not desirable since it would be inconvenient for the residents. If you look at the width from curb to curb of Calle Olivo, it's 40 feet. There's plenty of room for curbside parking on both sides of the road and two-way traffic in both directions without any conflict. So I guess, through the curves, if there's sight distance concerns, one thing that you can do is to add centerline striping to make sure the drivers stay on their half of the roadway. That's not a common thing that's done. Most residential streets in this town don't have any centerline striping. And also to the fact that I mentioned earlier that there were no reported collisions on the street speaks to the fact that sight distance is not an issue here. People are able to interpret the road conditions and get through without problems. Since the last meeting, we did receive a number of concerns with regard to the possibility of delays to emergency response vehicles if speed humps were added to the street. I did check with our fire chief, Ted Smith, on this topic, and he did say that speed humps is something that they don't prefer. What they generally prefer is the city go with passive solutions, which are not physical objects in the road. Usually that's like signing, striping, police enforcement. That's ideal for them. Their speed limit, or the speed that they travel when they respond to a call on a street like Olivo, they're not going to exceed the speed limit. They're going to travel at 25 miles an hour. They may drop it down to about 15 or 20 miles an hour, depending on a road that might have speed humps. Depending on how high those speed humps are. We have some streets in town that have 3-inch high speed humps and some with 2-inch high speed humps. They also realize that in certain situations, in order to reduce speed and cut down on collisions on residential streets, speed humps may be warranted. So in those situations, they would prefer the lower speed humps and even speed cushions, which I'll get into next. Okay, here's a photograph of a speed cushion. It's from the city of Ventura. I spoke with their engineers at length regarding their program. Speed cushion is essentially a speed hump, but with open slots at various points to allow the fire trucks and response vehicles to drive through unimpeded. Obviously, the drawback of speed cushions on certain vehicles like motorcycles is probably not going to have any impact on them. And then some drivers, what they may do is drive a pair of tires on the speed cushion and a pair of tires off the speed cushion. So you may not get as much slowing. But what Ventura had indicated is that the speeds on these streets that do have these speed cushions are down to about 25 miles an hour, and that's more or less ideal, and that's probably what you're shooting for on a residential street. The city of Ventura, before they put in these speed cushions, they were considering speed humps, but their fire department did have concerns with response time. So they tried these cushions with the open slots. They found that it worked fine. It achieves the slowing that the residents like, but at the same time, it didn't impede the emergency vehicle. So it's sort of like a win-win situation over there. And since the program started, they've have about 9 streets in their city with these speed cushions. Here's just another picture of a different speed cushion through a road that has some road curvature. And here's a photograph that shows a speed cushion where a fire truck is driving through more or less unimpeded. So tonight, Traffic Commission, you have a number of options listed in the staff report. Some are passive measures that the fire department would prefer, more or less through signs and striping, police enforcement, radar feedback signs, the neighborhood speed awareness program. But then there's also the non-passive measures, which are the speed cushions or speed humps. The least restrictive would be the speed cushions. And then the next one after that would be the 2-inch high speed hump. And the most restrictive would be the 3-inch high speed hump. But then if you wanted to opt for those non-passive measures, you would have to cite special circumstances such as were mentioned on those 9 other streets. So our staff recommendation is not to not to implement speed humps on Calle Olivo. The speed hump policy was not fully satisfied. Instead, we're opting to recommend those passive measures, which is the additional police enforcement, portable radar feedback sign, and to encourage the residents to participate in the neighborhood speed awareness program. So with that, I'll conclude this presentation. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions from commissioners of staff?
Thank you, Mr. Mashiko. I just have one question. Do you know, did you talk to them and ask the City of Ventura how long they have been using the speed cushions?
I didn't get a definitive answer, but I think they feel I got was maybe the early 90s is when they started their program.
So quite a while.
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Gregory.
If we opted for striping, what would be some of the options that you might be able to recommend?
Well, in terms of striping, probably the centerline striping through the curved section of the road, where that's probably where you're going to have more of the issues with sight distance, and just to make sure cars, as they come around the curve, they're on their the right side of the roadway, so that there's no conflict.
Would it be appropriate to designate a parking zone as well, just to create a sense of a narrow one-way road? I know when drivers have to be a little more aware of staying between the lines, they tend to reduce their speed. So,
yeah, that's an option that adds another line. You probably want to, if you're going to put a parking lane designation, you probably want to put on both sides of the road to make sure to identify the boundaries of where a parked vehicle should be. I guess the issue that may arise with something like that is when you start putting in lines on the road and identify where a driver and parked car should be, it might increase speeds because now you've introduced those boundaries that the driver has been given to drive down the road. But when it's unmarked, a driver might be a little bit more cautious and drive a little bit slower as they come around a curve.
I know we have used striping on a few other roads to stop them being test roads for the auto mall in the past, if I recall. Do we ever do a study about how well that might have reduced the speeds in those areas?
I think that was Valley Spring Drive. It's quite a number of years ago. I don't exactly recall what we did in terms of the after study. I think we measured the traffic volume, and I think we have the speed measurements, but I don't have that data tonight.
Okay.
Commissioner Ryder.
Reason to feel safe driving at a speed higher than 25 miles an hour. I was over there driving my car, and it seemed like 25 miles an hour was rather slow for the conditions there. And I see where the average speed here, the citizens are around 30 miles an hour, 33, 31, one was 36. So I wouldn't say that the public in general are actually speeding, but like all neighborhoods, you have your individuals that the speed limits don't apply to them. Another point I was making as well is that our connector roads in neighborhoods are 45 feet wide, no, 45 feet wide, excuse me. And they have a center line. And I agree with you, Mr. Mashiko, if you have a wide street, put a center line down it, all of a sudden it starts to look like a connector road. And those, for all the motorists, are usually 35 mile an hour speed limits. So I would concur that I don't think that would solve anything by striping. Sorry.
So I have a question. Sergeant Harwood, I have a question. You were not with us in November, but how long do you anticipate being able to support patrolling that area and sending an officer out? I mean, how reasonable is it for us to make that choice that we enforce speeding in that area?
Can you hear me? Unfortunately, I can't give you a lot of guarantees. I mean, we're very lucky in Thousand Oaks. The city is able to fund a traffic bureau, and we're very fortunate to have the number of personnel that we do have. But in the mornings, I have 5 traffic officers on. They come on at 7 in the morning. And their primary mission is school zones, the major thoroughfares where all the traffic volume is. And just like any community, that's typically when we get a lot of our accidents, is in that 7 to 9 window. So it doesn't take a whole lot for my guys all to get tied up on different accidents and investigations. And then they're not able to get to some of the secondary locations outside of this, like Cayo Olivo. I have a lot of streets like that in the city that we routinely can't get to. And even when we can get to them, we run into an issue with enforcement. And I know I've talked to the commissioners before about this with the enforcement. We don't enforce it at 26 miles an hour. They have to go into court. My officers have to be able to establish to a judge that it's unsafe. And the way they do that is through stopping distance, the speed the vehicles, how many feet per second the vehicle's traveling, what the stopping distance is at that speed compared to the 25 mile an hour zone. And there has to be some reasonableness in there. At 33 miles an hour in a residential street, none of my officers would write a speeding ticket. They would most definitely lose that in court. It would be dismissed. Typically, we would need to explain to a judge that, one, we have a significant accident problem. We've had a serious issue in there, combined with a lot of citizen complaints that have drawn our attention in there. In the 12 to 13 mile an hour range is where we would start the enforcement and trying to argue a case to a judge to prove it. So it gets a few issues. One, with my personnel, and I'm not complaining that I don't have enough people. We have a lot of people. We're very fortunate, but just with the other things, the city this size, if you can imagine, there's only 5 traffic officers for the entire, that's including Thousand Oaks, Newbury Park, all of the schools, all of the major thoroughfares where there's, where you may only get 200 or 300 cars on Cayo Olivo in the morning, which is a lot probably for the residents there, and I get that, versus Arbalest where there's hundreds every minute, and we have accidents daily, so their enforcement efforts get redirected to those locations. So I guess to answer your question, it's difficult at best. I mean, I try and use the radar trailer as much as I can. It's a good reminder. I try and work with Mr. Machiko, Ray Alonzo from the city. They keep me informed. I do put it out for extra enforcement, and Cayo Olivo's been on my list for a while because it keeps coming up. I know it's been a topic in my office, but realistically, we have not done or been able to do a good job there.
Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Gregory.
Yeah, actually, if I could ask maybe your opinion, and not to put you
Sure.
On the spot, but if you have something you could contribute to
Sure.
the effectiveness of striping and reducing speeds on streets. Does it have any effect, or are there any examples you can share with us?
I don't know of any examples. I mean, I know where we've done the striping, or I say we, the city, and the commission has approved it on some of the bigger thoroughfares, like Commissioner Reeder was talking about. It's helped with location of where the cars are, but I don't really think the speeds have been reduced a whole lot. So I don't really have. I don't have an engineering background, and I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm kind of mixed on whether it would improve it or make it worse.
So nobody's gone out the Valley Circle since, or
No, we go out there occasionally.
spring.
Yeah, Valley Spring.
Yeah.
It's not an area that we work regularly. Occasionally I'll get a complaint and it'll go on for extra enforcement, but we don't work that street on a regular basis, no.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, commissioners and staff. Anyone wishing to address the commission on this agenda item may do so by filling out a purple speaker card or a blue written statement card. Is there anyone here who wants to complete a purple card? Mrs. Zambrano? I've got cards. Okay. All right. So our lead speaker will have 10 minutes with a 5-minute closing remark time after all speakers have spoken. Okay. So our first speaker is Arnie Camp. Please state your name and city of residence for the record.
My name is Arnie Camp, and I live in the city of Thousand Oaks on Cayo Olivo. It's nice to see you again, commissioners. Just to recap, we're here to talk about speed humps as really the last-ditch effort to help slow cars down. We looked at all those other possibilities, police presence. I appreciate your honesty. If you recall, I'm also a police officer as well as a certified EMT. So I drive a police car, but I've also driven in ambulances. So I can definitely speak on behalf of first responders going to those SCA, those cardiac arrest calls, and just any calls for service, emergency or not. So again, Cayo Olivo, I mean, we have 51 out of 52%, 51 out of 52 support signatures. That's 98% support. If that doesn't say anything, I mean, I don't know what does. The only one, I actually had a really lengthy conversation with the one who didn't sign. And they didn't sign because, one, they'd prefer maybe a stop sign, but also it's because they have some lowered cars and a 1978 old Lamborghini that sits in their garage, and they fear that it would mess up their suspension. And so they admitted that they are choosing personal property over personal safety. In my profession, I have an issue with that. I believe personal safety is, on top of everything. And that's why we're all here today, is to talk about personal safety. Not just about getting hit and killed by a motor vehicle, but also just quality of life, not being able to walk up and down your street without a car going 30, 40, upwards to 55 miles per hour right past you while you're walking your dog and your kids. The entire street makes kind of a horseshoe, right? And so we looked at all those special considerations. On your list, the engineer mentioned that our street compares to Cayo Bougainvillea, right? And it lists those same 6. Just to add to that, if you're on that page, a couple additions I'd like to make that, if you're taking notes, is that, one, the differences that our street has, as opposed to Cayo Bougainvillea, who did not meet the standard as well, is that school traffic, we also are centered between Ladera and Park Oaks. And so we actually have 2 schools on either side of us. We have no sidewalks. Bougainvillea has one side with sidewalks. So we have no safety zone, no place to walk. In addition to those 6, I'd like to add the additional 3 that are on the original document as far as special considerations, which is hidden driveways. That's something that Commission talked about last time, being able to back up out of your driveway without fear of getting struck and or almost being struck, or getting passed on the left while you're trying to make a left turn into your driveway, which has happened numerous times. High ped traffic, blind curves. And the one I think that should be added is the elevation change. That's not one of the special considerations, but you do go up and down a hill. The entire street is either you're going up or down a hill. That affects speeds as well and stopping ability, depending on which way you're going. So I just wanted to point out those additional special circumstances that our street has to deal with versus other streets that did get speed humps passed and that precedent was set. So going back to other reinforcement radar trailers, again, I appreciate you mentioning that because we have tried that. We've had it out there ongoing. It works for about a day or 2, and then they go right back to going 30-plus, 40-plus miles per hour. So it's short-lived. Again, we're looking at long-term self-governing solutions, and this is really the last possible way. Speaking on behalf of emergency responders, first responders, I actually did speak directly with the fire captain out of Station 34, who is over on Arbalest and Moore Park. One, in relation to the letters that Mr. Delory wrote and the statistics, which, again, I'm glad you brought that up, Commissioner, because he had no idea where those statistics came from. The 10 seconds per speed hump makes absolutely no sense in reality. National averages, whether they came from a medical journal or what, have no sense in reality, especially in our neighborhood as well. We're talking about 4, maybe 5 speed humps total on our street, depending on where they would be placed. Between Arbalest and Hillman, there would only be 1 speed hump there. So if the fire department and Kenny Captain, had said if they choose to go use Hillman to get back into the Uppingham or Pedersen, Northwood neighborhood back up in there, that they would, at the most, they would have to go over is 1 speed hump because there's a natural gutter there, go over 1 speed hump, and then into the neighborhood using Hillman. So 9 times out of 10, though, they don't even go that route. From where their fire station is, they turn right, they go up Moore Park, up Lynn, and then turn down Pedersen because they can get to the neighborhood a lot quicker that way. So 9 times out of 10, they don't even go on our street. So speed humps wouldn't be a concern to them. And that's somebody that actually works on the streets with the guys and the engineers who are driving the trucks. So he made a couple great comments that I appreciate because he's been at Station 34 for about 10 years. And he had said in his time there, when he's on duty as captain, he's only really been to about 6 serious medical calls in our neighborhood. 6. So far cry from the 1800 that was mentioned. So 6 serious medical calls. And he said, really, in total, in his 25 years of service as a fire captain and just as a fireman, not a single call that he's ever been on would have been affected by 5 or 10 seconds. Not a single call. 5 or 10 minutes, yes, obviously every minute counts at that point. But 5 or 10 seconds, not a single call would have been impacted or changed whatsoever. And that's about what we're talking about. If they do have to go over 1, maybe 2 speed humps, he thought that maybe it'll slow the truck down about 2 or 3 seconds because when it is already going up a hill, 2, they're not going 30, 40, 50 miles per hour on a residential street anyway, so maybe they're going 20, 25. And they're going to slow down a little bit, but with the new air suspensions that are on the trucks these days, he said we hardly even feel those things when we go over them. And that's somebody who's actually out on the streets. Pushing a police car, again, I barely feel them as well. They don't affect my response time whatsoever. And sudden cardiac arrests, again, they're not that common, and they're not just for healthy hearts. That's actually a very small percentage of, as an EMT, I could speak because I've actually used AEDs. I've been on individuals who have had heart problems. And cardiac arrests, it's also for individuals who smoke and drink and are overweight and don't exercise. So it's not just the healthy heart. And so that was mentioned earlier. I had to address that. The statistics also say that all of those cardiac arrests, based on those numbers, have to do with having a cardiac arrest in their home. Well, that's also not based in reality. Cardiac arrests happen everywhere, at the store, at work, driving a vehicle. So, again, response times, the captain, Station 34, said, if you put a speed hump or 3 or 4 or 5 on your street, it's not going to affect us one bit. And that's somebody who's actually responding to calls in our neighborhood, in Thousand Oaks. So again, going over to the original survey, it was mentioned that, yeah, there are individuals who break the law and there's individuals who speed on occasion. Based on the speed survey, that's actually 82% of the vehicles driving on our street. 82% of the vehicles on our street are going over 25 miles per hour based on those speed surveys that were done. 82. And some of those exceeded 55. And I've been standing out there and walking up down the street when they've gone 50, 55, and it feels like a jet's going right by you when you're that close. And again, if you have to walk around a parked car and they don't slow down. Again, there are individuals, and that one individual who didn't sign thought, oh, people should self-govern themselves. They should abide by the law. They shouldn't speed. I don't speed, so I'm not. I don't want to impose that on somebody else. Well, again, it's not criminals who are speeding. It's the individuals, and I understand. I've sped, and I get it. It's individuals who are late for work or late picking up their kids or are talking on the phone. They're distracted, whatever. they're not paying attention to those larger signs or that striping. They're just trying to get to where they're going, and unless there's something there that can slow them down physically, like a speed hump, they're not going to pay attention and they're not going to slow down. They're just going to keep going as fast as they need to go to get to where they're going, because there are kids waiting for them at school, either at Ladera or Park Oaks, whichever way they need to go, or if they're walking. I mean, it's ridiculous. You're going to have a lot of people talk tonight about this issue. Hopefully you remember a lot of the stuff that we talked about last time, because it hasn't changed, and there has been collisions. Again, that collision that happened, just a month prior to our last meeting, which was right at Olivo and Hillman. All right, and one of those cars was completely totaled, and so I mean, it doesn't go when it's just property damage and there's no injuries. They usually don't go report it. They just handle it through their insurance, call the tow trucks, and they're out of there. There's usually not a police report unless there's an injury, right, or unless they request one. And so, and it's not about just saving fatalities. I want to stress that, right, because it was mentioned that there was only one fatality on residential streets. Well, that was one 2011. So, yeah, cars are driving faster. They have the ability to drive faster now, so people are going to drive faster. But it's about just slowing people down. It's about our quality of life. And you have the support in our neighborhood. You have 98% support in our neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Camp.
Any questions?
Any questions of Mr. Camp? I just want to make a note for our speakers. If you speak at the higher microphone, the lights are to your right on the lower levels, just so you can keep track of your speaking time. Our next speaker, Joe Sanders. Please state your name and city of residence.
Hi, my name is Joe Sanders. I live on Uppingham Street and in Thousand Oaks. And I guess the way I'd like to frame the question is, who wants to pay for a crime they didn't commit? I don't speed up and down Olivo, and I feel I would be punished if speed humps were put in. I don't see the need for it. I understand their concerns. They're right. The people that are speeding, grossly speeding, they need to be cited, and we need to get law enforcement out there. And I think if law enforcement were to get out there and start nailing some of these people, that would alleviate the problem. It'd be an attitude adjustment for the people that are speeding. That's basically all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Jeffrey Stith.
Hello. Thank you again for your time. Jeffrey Stith, Thousand Oaks, and I live on Cali Olivo. To the gentleman that just spoke on Uppingham, he actually has options, and his options are not to take Cali Olivo. We don't have an option. He can go around Pedersen and come right back into his street. Regarding some of the passive measures that have been spoken about, I haven't heard anybody say that they work. It may work. From the statistics and the speed limits for the speed humps that the firemen can get through, and then the 2-inch and the 3-inch, every single one of those says that it works. It slows down speeds. Passive, they say it may work. We don't want a may work. We want it works. Cali Olivo would not be setting precedent. A street in Thousand Oaks has already set precedent. We would just be following that precedent that's already been set. The criteria that have been met for that, we meet, we exceed. All but one person, one house that's not even on Cali Olivo has said there's a problem. As you stated earlier in our first meeting, that never happens. It happens here. The other thing is Mr. Machiko said that most streets in Thousand Oaks have some kind of a sight line issue because they're not laid out on a grid. I'd like to know if those sight line issues come with a hill. As Arnie said, you're either going up or you're going down. I have to force myself to slow down. You turn the corner, you get on the hill. What do? You gun it to get up the hill. Next thing you know, you look down, you're going 35 really easy. And then you get to the top of the hill and you go down even faster. I had mentioned before, I don't know if you recall, that I work out, I was cutting trees down in my front yard and I was in the street. People don't care. They just go right around you. I back into my driveway. Just 2 weeks ago, I pulled in to back into my driveway and a car drove right around me between the driveway and my car. It's the cavalier attitude, quality of life, and just want to reiterate that you won't be setting precedent because precedent has already been set. So thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Aiden Camp.
Hi, my name is Aiden Camp. I'm 7 years old and I look both ways before crossing a street. I want speed humps because there are children and dogs that can get run over by a car. If the cars do not slow down, the children and the dogs will have bad luck. What I mean by bad luck is that they could get run over or hit by a car, and that is why I want speed humps. Thank you for your time for listening to this.
Thank you, Aiden. Mike Bose.
Hi there. I'm Mike Bose. I live in 2706 Cali Olivo. It's right on the corner of Cali Mandro and Cali Olivo. My family's been dealing with this for 20 years because we went through this 20 years ago. We never let the kids in the front yards. The pets were always kept in the back. It was just always too dangerous. Pulling in our driveway, it's a menace almost every day, leaving and coming. You get tailgated up the road, and you get honked at, get yelled at. It's just the quality of life. It just hasn't been very good for 20 years because of the thoroughfare through the those roads up there. It's dangerous. And the speed bumps, I own an auto repair shop in town here, and the speed bumps, they don't do anything to suspension. If you're going more than 25, yes, it can damage it, but less than 25 or around 25, it's not going to hurt the suspension system because they're designed to go over humps anyway. So thanks for your time.
Mr. Bose, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So you stated your address is 2706.
Correct.
Our map with proposed locations for speed bumps, the speed humps, would place one right at your house.
Okay. That's fine with me.
So sounds of cars going over, whether it's loud or just over, you'll be there. You'll be listening to that. It'll be right in front of you. How do you feel about that?
I can deal with the cars going over the humps because that's not that noisy. But when they come barreling through there at 35 miles an hour, the windows shake and rattle. So cars going over the speed bump's not going to make the windows rattle, but cars with loud exhaust going through there is just going to be pretty noisy. So, to answer your question?
It's up to you. Next speaker is Joe Sullivan.
My name is Joe Sullivan. Thousand Oaks is my residence. I live on Calle Olivo and Calle Pimiento. Basically, I came here today I wanted to show my support for these speed humps. And I just want to tell a quick story. I have a 14-month-old daughter that I take across the street, excuse me, Monday through Friday at 7:20 a.m. every Monday through Friday, and I carry her. And just this last week, I looked both ways. It was clear, and I got to the middle of the street, and there was a car that was coming down Calle Olivo towards Arbalest. It's a curve, and it's not an incline, but it's a decline. And it only took me 2 or 3 seconds to get to the middle of the street, and the car was literally about 50 feet or so because it was going so fast and it couldn't see me. So I kind of jogged, and it was fine. But if there were speed humps, that situation wouldn't have come anywhere near what it was. That's what I wanted to say. And thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Aaron Horseman. Thank you.
My name is Aaron Horsema. I reside in Thousand Oaks on Calle Olivo. I've resided at that location about 3.5 years, and I've had several close calls backing out of my driveway. A lot of times the cars, I'm very cautious because I know the curves, and when I finally do commit to go out into the street, there have been numerous occasions where I've been halfway into the street and have cars barreling down on me. Some of them stop, some of them will pass you whatever way they can, and it's very unsafe. When I come home from work, if I'm parking on the street, mainly I park in the driveway, but if I park on the street, cars go right by. They don't care if your door's open or anything like that. So I'm in favor of the speed bumps. And I've seen the measures, the radar and the officers patrolling. I have a lot of respect for peace officers. I'm a peace officer myself, and I have not seen too many people receiving speeding tickets on that road that should have, for whatever reason. And I understand what you talked about in the courts, but people are just driving entirely too fast on that street. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Sabrina Falcone.
Falcone, yes.
Falcone. I did that last time.
Okay. I don't usually speak in public. I don't do this, but I am here to show my neighbors, and since I am a new mother, support for the speed humps. I live at 2786 Calle Olivo. I am the second house on the left off of Arbalest, and vehicles will turn onto Calle Olivo and be at speeds above 30, 35 easily, and I'm at the second house. And the third house, my neighbor, that's where the gutter is and the dip, and people crash. I mean, it's the loudest noise ever, and my baby's nursery is right there, and I've seen 2 vehicles crack their radiators and the radiator fluid all in front of our house for that. So I think if there were speed humps there, they would have already been slowed down for that gutter. And I take my son and my dogs on a walk 2 to 3 times a day around the loop of Calle Olivo, and like the others have said, the cars don't care if you're walking around a parked car. They are swerving around you into the other lane where another car should be coming down. So again, I fully support the speed humps, and I've lived there for 5 years and will continue to live there. So I hope this all goes through, and thank you for your time.
I have a question for you,
yes,
Sabrina. So you live between the Arbalest and the first cross street?
Yes.
Okay. So you're close to the gutter. However,
yes,
on that first block of the street, there will not be a street hump because it's a pretty short distance, and you have the gutter.
Yes.
So speed humps don't help you in that. So you recognize that, right?
I do understand, yes, completely, that we wouldn't have a speed hump in front of our house. But it's the fact that I still take my dogs and my child on a walk, and my neighbors are concerned as well. It's a kid-friendly neighborhood. There's children playing all the time. I know that it won't necessarily affect my house, but I'm here to show support from my neighbors and myself when I do go on walks 2 to 3 times a day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Alik Shulman.
Yes. Good evening. My name is Alex Shulman, resident of Thousand Oaks. I live on Cayo Oliva, 2731 Cayo Oliva. That's approximately left corner of Cayo Oliva and Hillman. Thank for speech and everything. I do believe there is so many circumstances still missing in the data that were provided today by the city. Besides the amount of residents, houses, and everything, I do believe we need to count how many kids living in those houses and how many elderly people and pets as well living in the houses. This is a very important number that will figure out exactly what we need to do with this, because every other house within past 5-10 years we have kids, 2+ kids in every house that we live in Cayo Oliva currently, and every year we have another family coming in and adding to this small community with kids. We do have very often kids play around. We have garage sales. That's a very important part as well when traffic moves around. And I just spent today with family at home, and I was working in the garden a little bit, and I do hear a lot of motorcycle passing by. They just enjoy our street just for fun. One major circumstance, not just because a street straight or not straight, our street is going up and down and goes sunset and sunrise. I do believe myself, I leave 6-7 o'clock in the morning. When I leave my house, I see sunset right away, blocking my view completely. It takes me a second or two to pull shade and put my sunglasses in just few feet, 100 feet, may affect the speed, and driver can totally lose the control where the condition is. And so I'd really appreciate if we apply some kind of speed humps. Besides that, I do believe, quality of life, it does really affect, We do hear very often high-speed running cars, and people enjoying, and we don't have sidewalks. That's a major part. A lot of elderly people walking the dogs around, and I say hi, they stop on the side. Sometimes we're talking across the street because they're afraid to cross the road because the sun is blocking the view of the drivers. So we have to look, especially when we're walking kids, we walk our little kids to elementary school, we have to look 100 feet away, across the street, like with the left corner on Cayo Oliva, how far is that? I teach my kids very, very carefully, Pay attention, because the walking distance of our street probably, I do believe it's wide from wall to wall, and if a little kid walk with the parent, it takes, 5 to 10 seconds to cross little road, but the car takes seconds, takes really high speed, getting really fast. So it is very important. The sunset, sunrise, and as well as the life quality of family with the kids. This is very young community in our small little school, so it's very important to pay attention to this as well.
We have a question for you.
Yes, sure.
Yes, hi. You mentioned that there are motorcycles that just like your street. There's been discussion about the speed cushions, which would not be effective for motorcycles. If you had your choice.
Yes. If motorcycle has a speed, he wouldn't be able to guide between those, humps. Depends what the distance, if you're really in a high speed, you won't be able to make it exactly between the humps, the distance, 10, 12 inches. You have to be really carefully to drive your vehicle to make it with it.
Okay.
So he will not pay attention to forward, he's going to pay attention how we're going to make it in between to make it higher speeds. So then he's going to lose the attention to the drive and to the far distance, That's the big deal as well.
So you don't think that, so you would prefer speed humps?
Yes.
But rather than the speed cushions?
I guess that's what
that was my question.
Yeah.
The speed humps, okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we'll listen to Arnie Camp, our lead speaker. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you again for spending the time and listening to all of us. I don't have any of my notes, so I'm just going to talk just off the top of my head. And just kind of to recap, as far as our neighborhood and our street, we have a great street. We love where we live. We just want to make it better. We want our quality of life to increase. We don't want to fear and get frustrated every time a car flies by doing 30, 40, 50 miles per hour next to us. One of our neighbors who was here last time, and I think he mentioned it, that he yelled at a car that was going 45, and that car slammed on its brakes in the middle of the street, jumped out, and confronted him and wanted to start fighting with him. And he's like, dude, I just wanted you to slow down. And so, I mean, it's just daily stuff like that we're dealing with. As far as the speed cushions, I'm not a big fan of the speed cushions. As far as I know, in my experience, most of those engines have dually 4 wheels on the back anyways. I don't know how they can fit in between those 2 little slots, maybe the front tires, but they're going to feel it in the back. So maybe it'll only slow them down 2 seconds. But the captain that I spoke with who patrols Almendro and goes over those speed humps, he says, yeah, they don't really affect us. Again, it's a residential area. They're not doing code 3 on the freeway. You know, they're going to where they need to go. He said it'll slow, if they go over 2 speed humps, it'll slow them down maybe 5 seconds or so, 5-6 seconds. He's like, it's not going to change the difference in the call. And again, as a first responder, you know, I believe that too. It doesn't change anything. Again, it's just, you look around, you see all the faces in here and the kids. I mean, that's our neighborhood. And other streets that have had similar or under the threshold vehicles per day have gotten speed humps for whatever their circumstances, their special circumstances. You know, whether it's like Bougainville where they have, you know, the same 6 that we have, but we have, you know, 8 or 9, if depending on how you count them. So we just want the same quality of life that they have. You know, really, that's all we're asking. And those passive measures, additional police patrol, you know, we know it's not going to happen, and through no fault to theirs or my own. If I was asked to patrol a street that gets, you know, 100 cars per day versus 1,000, I would spend my time on the 1,000. And I can cite the same cars, rolling the same stop signs, going the same speed limit. It's just distracted driving. They're just not paying attention to how fast they're going, and that's what's happening on our street. So the radar trailer, again, we talked about, it's short term. It's not long term. We've been down that road. We have speed limit signs. People know the speed limit is 25. At least they should. There's big signs there already. So those passive measures, you might as well just tell us you're not going to do anything. The speed humps, I would settle. I'd be just as happy with the 2-inch speed hump than a 3-inch. That's my own personal preference, because at least that's something that's going to slow cars down. Maybe it'll only slow those 40, 50 mile per hour speeders down to 30. I'll take that. I would much rather them slow down to 20 to 25 or 15 to go over that little speed hump if it's 3 inches. But I'll take some kind of action. The speed cushion, again, there are no speed cushions in our city. There's probably a reason, but I don't think the engines are affected, you know, any different than putting a speed hump, and that would solve the motorcyclist. That would solve, you know, all the issues, whether it's a 2-inch or a 3-inch, if you're looking for a happy medium. But just, you know, help us improve the quality of our life. You know, we've been down this road 18 years ago. The neighbors who lived here, they tried it. They got squashed at that time because the administrative, you know, fire chief said, we don't like speed humps. So that's where the conversation ended, and it got squashed. Well, now you're listening to a first responder who goes over speed humps, who goes on emergency calls, who've been to cardiac arrest calls. I've talked to captains. They've said the same thing. These are the guys out on the street who are going over them, and it's not affecting us one bit. We'll still save lives the best we can. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Camp. At this point, do commissioners have questions of staff? Anything that's not been answered by anything we've heard so far? Mr. Mashiko, do you have any response to anything you heard tonight?
Yeah, I don't think there's really a whole lot I have to add in terms of issues that were brought up tonight. The only thing maybe if Mr. Camp brought up issues about other items he would like to add if there were special circumstances cited, such as hidden driveways, blind curves, elevation change. Some of that is already considered in the general statement. If you say sight distance issues, all that is taken into consideration. Heavy pedestrian traffic speaks to the fact that there's no sidewalks on the street. So there could be redundancy if you were to list all these.
Okay, we're going to close the community meeting at this point. Do we need further discussion, or is there a motion among the commissioners? Commissioner McMahon?
I actually will make a motion, and if anybody wants to have discussion after that, we can do that. But I will make a motion that I move that we install speed humps as put on this, designed on the map that we were given in our report. I have seen the exceptions or the what do you call it? The warrants that that are not quite met, but we also have all these facts that there are no sidewalks, there are hidden driveways, the curve, and all that. I think that all of these are legitimate, and the thing that affected me the most is this is a community, and the whole community, with just a very few exceptions, wants this. And I've been on the Traffic Commission for a really, really long time, and it doesn't happen like that. And you seem to have such a nice, cohesive group, neighborhood in the true sense of the word, and I like that. I like that feel, and I feel like that this is something we can do to keep that feel going, and I feel like it is warranted. So I move to install the speed humps, and I'll leave it to our engineers to decide whether they want to put in the 2-inch or the 3-inch.
Thank you. Any other comments?
We don't put humps in lightly for any reason. I personally am not a fan of them. I wouldn't want to live in a neighborhood of them. But I don't live in your neighborhood. I look at all the factors of why you want them, not why I don't want them, okay? And when anybody brings me information that would, because it's not a competition. We're here to protect people, to make it a better world to live in. I see a few people that don't want them. I'm sorry if you have personal reasons for not liking them. Our main reason here is to make the quality of life, to protect somebody. I don't ever want to have to go and say, oh, we could have put speed humps in it and that child wouldn't have got run over, or something similar to that. But it does affect people, and health and whatnot. So I did look at statistics of some things that were brought up. I didn't find them relevant, though. So that's why, I asked a couple questions, but I did do some research, and I'd be happy to share my statistics that I found, and find out from you, because it's not a competition. I find this neighborhood with 98% approval for something, and it seems like a nice community, the kind of community people want to live in. It's a community of kids. It's a community where neighbors now have come together to improve everybody's life. And I'm sorry if you people that probably are outside of the neighborhood ruin your neighborhood. I guess the only thing we can really do is to take an action to maybe dissuade them, maybe take a different route. So I would say I would support humps at this point, and I would leave it up to staff as to the proper kind. Now, we only make recommendations to City Council, and this will be presented to them. So I suggest you all show up there, okay? We don't have the right or the pen to write for anything. We just make a recommendation. I find enough circumstances here that coincide with Calle Bougainvillea and the two schools and the hidden driveways and everything that you brought up to make a compelling reason why you have a unique set of circumstances, and we're here to try to protect the public, and I think this is the right step to take.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Ryder?
I would like to see speed cushions, actually. Motorcycles were brought up. Well, I've ridden motorcycles for years. Motorcycles don't slow down for speed humps. You just stand up on your pegs and let the bike go over it. So just take motorcycles off the table as far as a reason not to have speed cushions.
Thank you, Commissioner. I also agree with making the recommendation that we, despite the warrants, put forward a recommendation to City Council that speed humps of some measure, some type, be installed on your street. My personal background is I worked for a fire department. I am married to a fireman, and I've spoken with a firefighter who is responsible for our city. And my concern is response times. My preference would be that we install speed cushions because the cushions allow for the width of the truck bed to travel, and it really helps them to respond quickly and take care of you as quickly and as appropriately in terms of their response time as they should. My second consideration would be a 2-inch speed hump, which it's comfortable going over at 25 or 20 miles an hour. I didn't try it at 35 or 40 today because I didn't want to hurt my car, but I did travel all throughout the streets that we have that have speed humps, specifically those that didn't meet the warrants originally according to our speed hump policy. And I do feel that because you have the hill with parked cars and no sidewalk and driveways, I do see the need for some traffic calming measure. My personal, and I would turn this over to the, obviously to the experts to decide, my preference would be to see speed cushions or 2-inch speed humps above the 3-inch. But aside from that, I do concur we should make this recommendation. Now I think we need to call for a vote.
When your name is called, please. Oh.
Okay. Also, when you make this recommendation, you may want to also cite those special circumstances. Would they be the ones listed on page 7 of the staff report?
They would be. And then, yes, they would be the ones. Actually, I was looking at the ones on page 10 and 11, and then adding elevation change, unless you feel that that's redundant with number 6. Okay, do you want me to just read them off? I'll be happy to do that.
Okay. Or actually, it's the one on the bottom. It says, I'm looking at the bottom of the page. It says page 7. But, yeah, the upper left corner says page 4.
Oh, I see. Okay, so the traffic diversion, the school traffic, no street lights, no sidewalks on both sides of the street, shortcut traffic, and impaired sight distance due to road curvature, and maybe we could put and elevation change, just to make everybody happy.
And would proximity to 2 schools be relevant?
Well, they do have here school traffic.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you want to put both schools in parentheses instead of one, we could do that. We might also add high pedestrian activity. Is that got to do with the no sidewalks or?
Yeah, I think that already speaks to the no sidewalks.
It does, okay. I think he just said that. That's it. So, does that suffice? Okay.
Okay, and also, if you can just clarify the recommendation in terms of the speed humps or the speed cushions.
My original motion was for speed humps, not speed cushions. So my motion stands at speed humps. I did not specify in my motion as to whether they were the 2-inch or the 3-inch. It was to be determined by the traffic engineering department. I think it was a personal opinions expressed that about other things, but that was my original motion.
Oh, yes, and then if that's the case, then yeah, you'll be voting on whether or not this shall be basically just speed humps, whether the 2-inch or 3-inch.
Correct.
Mr. Mashiko or Mr. Finley, do you need us to specify what type?
As the motion stands right now, it's for the speed humps. And the maker of the motion didn't give any flexibility there. So at this point in time, if
it's speed humps,
2 or 3-inch, and
correct.
that would be what we would take forward as the recommendation.
That's my motion. Yes.
Would you modify that recommendation then to just state 2-inch or a speed cushion based on staff's recommendation?
Does staff have a recommendation, a preference?
Well, probably our recommendation is just go with our standard speed humps that we've been using throughout town.
The 2-inch?
The 2-inch high speed humps.
I would modify.
Usually gentler on the vehicles, and that's sort of one of the reasons why it's been used on some of our other streets.
I would be happy to modify my motion for that to 2-inch.
Shall we call for a vote?
When your name is called, please state yes or no. Commissioner Gregory?
Yes.
Commissioner McMahon?
Yes.
Commissioner Reeder?
No.
Vice Chair Engler?
Yes.
Motion carries 3-1.
Yes, Commissioner?
I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank you all for speaking up and speaking out, and all the kids who are here. I want you all to stress to these children that speed humps are not going to make this street safe. They still need to walk with the parent. They still need to look both ways and all that. It's not an easy answer. It's not an easy fix. There's still going to be cars, and they're still going to go fast. And they're going to still have the possibility of hurting you. So you have to be really careful, even if these happen. Okay, I just want to make sure you know that.
I also wanted to say we are the public forum for you to bring a concern, which you did in November. You've been working on this longer than that. You spoke to us in November. We did more research, and you came back and spoke to us again tonight. I can't stress enough the importance of sharing your concerns for or against a decision like this to our city council, because it doesn't stop with us. Our recommendation now goes to council. All right. As I just said, our recommendation goes to City Council. Interested parties may attend that meeting and speak either for or against the recommendation of the Traffic Commission. Any person wishing to appeal a decision of the Traffic and Transportation Advisory Commission shall file a written appeal and pay a fee? An appeal fee with the city clerk's office within 14 calendar days of this decision. The matter will be referred to the city council at the earliest reasonable and available date. The $1,400 appeal fee, and we'll have to check and see if that's accurate, will be refunded only if the City Council overturns the Traffic and Transportation Advisory Commission's decision. An appeal form is available tonight. Please contact Mrs. Zambrano. Okay.
I have a question.
Absolutely.
Streetlights, would that have to be a whole new party to suggest that for Cayo?
We can't speak with you without a microphone, and we can't really do anything without it being on the agenda. The best way to handle this is to talk to Mr. Machiko after the meeting.
Thank you. All right, next we go to 6B, our status report for Hillcrest Drive restriping.
Okay, that's just a quick information item that talks about a number of outreach, or summarizes a number of outreach meetings that our staff has been participating in since they last saw you in October regarding potential to restripe Hillcrest Drive. This item will probably come back in next month or March meeting with a more detailed report from our engineer, Mr. Tay.
Thank you. This brings us to 6C, the Bicycle Advisory Team, BAT recommendations, and School Safety Team monthly status report, which is an information item that was provided in your packet. Any questions of that information?
I had one question. It mentioned a sidewalk being installed on Westlake Boulevard south of the 101. I was wondering what the extent of that sidewalk would be. Would it be just to Townsgate, or would it extend further down?
It extends actually well beyond that, another block entirely down. I'm not sure exactly the cross street, but we can bring back a report on that if you'd like.
For information, you bet. Thanks.
Okay, item 7, status report for prior traffic commissioner recommendations, none. Item 8, commissioner referrals, none. For October 16, from October 16th, 2013. Item 9 now, work program and commission schedule. Mr. Machiko?
Okay, yeah, that's just basically a listing of some of the future items in the pipeline that we'll be bringing to you at future meetings.
Okay, item 10, Traffic Commission comments or discussions.
Thank you. After tonight, I would love for the commission to invite a representative from Ventura County Fire to address us and really understand what the feeling of the fire department is about speed bumps. And I had one other thought, and that's just escaped me now. But I'd like to hear it right from the fire department rather than anecdotal incidences. So I'm sure humps will come up in the future, and I'd just like to have that information in my mind. Secondly, the California legislature has introduced AB 612, which has passed the Assembly, and it's up for a vote in the Senate. And staff, if you could research what AB 612 is and how it might affect our traffic situations here in the city, I would appreciate that. And that's all I have to do. Thanks.
and I just wanted to ask one more request formally, that if we do have any traffic measurements on Valley Spring Drive or any other, road that we have striped, to see what its effectiveness of creating that sense of a narrower, thoroughfare. Not asking for any new studies or anything, but if anything like that comes to mind, if you could share it with us. Thank you.
Okay, I think that brings us to item 11. Our next meeting, as far as I know, unless staff has a different opinion about scheduling, but our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, February 19th at 6:30 p.m. Is that correct? All right. Meeting here in the boardroom at the Civic Arts Plaza on the third floor. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and you're adjourned.